Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
Welcome to Practical Bass, where each week we pick a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we take it apart and look at it from different directions and hopefully bring some wisdom and experience to the table and help you bring your gigs and your gear to the next level. That is our mission. You'll find it plastered all over the homepage of our website, practicalbass.com. We hope you'll come visit and do leave us some feedback. Let us know what you think of the podcast, this episode, or any others that you've heard. You can leave us feedback through a form on the website, or you can just email us at podcast@practicalbass.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. Look for Practical Bass on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, even Instagram. We'd love to see pictures of you, your gear, anything you've picked up over the course of your travels or listens to our podcast for that matter. And we also hope that you'll subscribe and share this out. That really is how the podcast stays alive. It means a lot to us that you guys are out there. Please help us out by subscribing and sharing the episodes to your friends and your colleagues. So Dave, I think we have a pretty special episode today, something we have not tried before, right?
Yes.
What are we doing? Tell me, Dave. Tell me, oh, Dave, what are we doing?
Under compression.
Under compression. We're going to, so this episode, I'm going to confess something. We take our episodes pretty seriously and we write some notes beforehand. So we, kind of have an idea where we're going to go outline wise. And, that way it's not a snooze fest, or at least not as much of one.
Right. Not so willy-nilly.
Yeah.
We're very planned and practical.
Yeah. Stay a little focused because, we want to get the information to folks, but we're taking a little bit of a left turn. We have not done notes for the show because there really wasn't a way to elegantly script it. We're going to do something different.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. There's going to be actual sounds of basses coming at you. This episode is not meant for us to show off skills. This is just, we're going to try and demonstrate something that we talked about on one of our most popular episodes still to this date.
Yep.
Which was about compressors.
Yes.
The compressor is not a Swiss Army knife, but it's a necessary tool. It's like if you were digging into a beach, or if you were like in battle, this would be like your shovel for digging your foxhole.
Right.
Right.
It's actually no, I think that's a good point. Like when you talk about like the pedals and effects, right? A lot of bassists are going to say, I think the natural course is your tuner pedal, right?
Yes.
And it can be a pedal, right? Like it's when you're like, okay, instead of just the clip on, I'm going to do the pedal because I'm live and there's a lot of things going on. The second one becomes a compressor.
Right.
And a compressor is not absolutely necessary because you can do things with your hands to like manipulate it or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But once you discover it, it's kind of a gem.
Yeah. Yeah. They're really helpful for getting like a certain quality of sound. And like you said, not necessary. I mean, you remember we interviewed Igor. He doesn't use any pedals, any sort of effects of any kind. It's directly from his fingers out to the, through the wires to the speakers. But, I mean, I think a lot of bass players like to have a compressor. It can kind of even out, unplanned things like, if you hit a note a little harder than you meant to, it kind of, can rein it back in. You can also make sure that like that one note that maybe you didn't finger quite as cleanly and you hit it a little bit softer, it can kind of bring it back up to a level where it's unnoticeable. Right.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like I'll just be like, in my experience, if you have, I've played a lot of basses that are not super nice. Like they're not in the 500 plus range, right? Or 1,000 plus range. And there's an inconsistency from string to string. And you can't fix it with strings. Like there gets a point where it's just like you've managed everything. Compressors really clean it up.
Yeah. Yeah. They can do a lot for a bass that's in kind of rough shape and hasn't been like, hasn't been engineered or set up well or whatever the case may be. I mean, it won't fix every problem, but they're just helpful. Compressors are helpful to have around. Just no two ways about it. And they're especially good for slap and pop because they can keep, your funkier lines or whatever from like hitting your audience in the face. But yeah, so
Right.
we talked a lot about compressors in another episode, so we're not
Yep.
going to talk about everything about compressors. It's awesome. Go
Yeah.
check out our episode on compressors. It's back in the archive. You can find it at practicalbase.com. Just look back through the episodes. I'm pretty sure it was among our first 10 episodes that
Yeah.
we did. So if you go back to the very first page, you will find it in there.
And thanks, Paul, for keeping me in line because I was ready to go back to that episode.
It was a good episode.
It was a good episode.
It was very
Yeah.
popular. There's, you want to go back to your hometown. It's like, it's fun. It's fun
and
going
just
back.
for the record, this is what happens when there's no script.
Right.
By the way.
You guys are, you're hearing, this is like when we don't make notes, we just go off on a tangent. It happens.
So compression.
So yeah, compression. So here's what we're going to do. So we've got a bass here and it's basically running through our compressor. We've got, now what we happen to have here is a compressor. It's a Mark bass, tube-based compressor pedal. It's got 6 knobs on it. And just so you guys know, from left to right, they are gain, threshold, ratio, attack, release, and volume. And we're going to just spend a couple minutes just reminding you what these do. And we're going to kind of demonstrate them. Now, we thought this would be a cool episode to do because we did this whole thing on compression, but we never actually had any way for you to hear what the results are on a bass when you use these controls. So we have a bass that is on here. Like this is kind of an uncompressed signal right here. There you go. Just a couple notes. That's what you get.
Right.
So that's just a raw signal coming out. And what we're going to do over the course of the episode is we're going to twiddle these knobs. We're going to tell you what we're doing. And as we twiddle them, you're going to kind of hear the effect of what's going to happen on the bass.
Right.
So yeah. So just a reminder of how these work. So we starting from left to right, we've got gain. And on this particular model, the gain is the first thing because what it really is it's adjusting the input level of the bass. So, if you have a very loud bass, you might turn that gain knob down a little so that you're not fuzzing out the compressor before you start. This particular compressor has a tube in it. And if you turn the gain up too much, it's going to be kind of, fuzzy and sizzly because you're going to kind of overdrive the tube a bit. That might be an effect that you want.
Is the just for clarity, is the gain does it start at 0?
No, actually. So the gain, it's like an addition thing. And I think they have like a buffer in there. So you pretty much adjust the gain up to where you are comfortable. Like you're not getting any fuzz on the top of the bass. And then
Right.
you turn it back just a little bit from there. So you're getting a perfectly clean signal.
Got it.
If that's
Okay.
what you're looking for.
Right.
That would be one way to use it. So the next thing is threshold. The threshold knob is going to determine how loud does the bass signal have to be before the compressor decides to kick in and do something.
Right.
And so it goes, the knob goes from left to right. And on the right, basically the threshold is like all the way up towards 0 dB. 0 meaning like that's the highest. Threshold is basically it's levels that are in negative dB. So in other words, 0 is the highest it can be. Like that means full on, nothing but signal. You would, probably just be clipping at that point. And then you bring the threshold down to say, oh, okay, at negative 10 dB, like 10 dB below that peak, I want to start compressing. Or negative 20 dB before the peak, I want to start compressing. And the more you turn it back towards the left, the lower the threshold gets. So in other words, 0 is all the way to the right. And then as you turn it backwards, you're kind of lowering the threshold, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
So then the more so if I'm going so if I'm going closer to like on the counterclockwise side,
if you're turning it counterclockwise, you're lowering the threshold. So
Which
zero is all the way up, and then you're turning it down from like -1, -2, -3, and keep going
right.
backwards, downward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
So and this may not work the same on every compressor. You got to look at your manual to see how yours works.
Yep.
But that's how this one works.
Got it.
The next thing you got is ratio. Now, ratio is basically the number of dB they're going to be reduced when the compressor kicks in, or the amount they're going to be reduced, right? So if the ratio is 2-to-1, then that means over the threshold value, it would take 2 dB more signal to make the signal coming out only go up 1 dB, right? If the ratio
Which is like discrete.
Yeah.
right? Like
Well,
relatively discreet.
2 to 1 is very gentle. Yeah.
Gentle.
4 to 1, 3, somewhere between 2.5 and 4 to 1 often is what you're going to see for bass. But that's kind of more, that would be like kind of modern, like a modern equivalent. But you can find like vintage bass units will be more like 6, 7, 8 ratio of like 6, 7, 8 to 1.
Right.
And they are like, they're really going to kick in. And that ratio is it's like the character of the compressor. Like how squashy is it? And, the higher it gets, basically it means the more squashed the signal is going to be over that threshold limit.
Right.
If you turn the ratio all the way up on most compressors, it becomes what's called a brick wall limiter. Now, there may be an actual number for what it matches. Like some compressors will only go up to like 10 to 1 at most. Some of them will go to like 100 to 1. Like when you get to the very last bit, you may be going like, oh, now it's 1, 2, 2.5, 3, 4, 7, 10, 20, 100. Like, at the end, it like basically becomes like I said, a limiter. And that means the bass signal will not go above that no matter how loud you try and play it.
Is that the knob where like sometimes we'll see infinity?
Yes. Sometimes you'll see infinity there. And that basically means like it caps and that's it. That's all you get.
Okay.
Okay. So the next thing is attack. And attack is basically how fast the compressor is going to clamp down when it sees the signal start going over the threshold. So on this particular compressor, the attack value is, think of it as time. So the more you turn it up, the longer a time it is, right? So think of it as like in milliseconds. If the attack is all the way back to the counterclockwise as far as it'll go, that basically means it's going to clamp down as quickly as it can. And it may be like fractions of a millisecond. Who knows? When you turn it all the way up, it's going to be a lot more than that, probably hundreds of milliseconds, maybe 100 milliseconds or more before it clamps down.
So then if we're talking about attack, like if your attack is really short, right?
Yep.
And then your ratio's really high,
it's going to be very squashy.
It's going to be super squashy.
Very squashy.
Right.
Yeah.
I
the
gotcha.
more, like typically you use a longer attack if you're trying to let transients out. And the transient is like that first snap of an attack, like the pluck of the string, or even more like the pop of of a funk note.
Right.
You want, like, if you don't let that through, it sounds weird and squashy.
Right.
So you want some of it to come through and then quickly clamp down so that it's not like continuing to be loud for very long.
Right.
Okay. And the same thing goes for release, the next knob. Again, it's a measure of time, from short on the left side all the way turning it up to more on the right side. And the release is how long it's going to take for the compressor to kind of like let go of the compression. And typically what you would do is like if you're trying for it to be subtle, you'd have a shorter release.
Right.
If you want it to be more kind of sustain, you turn up the release so the compressor stays active longer.
Uh-huh. Gotcha.
Now, finally, there's a knob called volume, and this is similar. Sometimes you'll see this called makeup gain. In some compressors, it might be called gain, like the gain may be the last knob as opposed to ours. Like the gain on where we have a knob called gain, that's the input gain.
Right.
In this case, the volume, which is on the right, what that is it allows you to make up for the compression so that if you're heavily compressing, the signal is probably going to get quieter sounding.
Yeah.
So you can turn up the volume so that it matches your original volume more closely, but just has a much more even sound. And we'll play with all these. All right. So we ready to try this?
Yeah.
All right.
So where are we going to start?
All right. So let's do this. To start out with, let's turn the ratio all the way down. Mm-hmm. And let's put the threshold at, I would say, about 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Which is a very high threshold. Like we're going to get really loud, I think, to turn the compression on. Maybe even 130 or 2. We'll start there. All right. So let's make the attack. Let's put the attack at probably about 2 p.m. On the knob.
Yep.
And I would say let's put the release at about 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 9 a.m. Let's make that about 9 a.m. It's going to be very fast release. So slow attack.
Okay.
Very fast release. And we'll see what the volume's at where it is. Hopefully the signal will be good here. And I'm just going to do some slap and pop because I feel like that is easier to hear what's going on. We'll probably do a couple different riffs or something. All right. So we'll have probably not seeing the light come on the compressor at this point.
Right.
And the reason for that is the threshold set very high. And even if it did come on, the ratio is set at basically pretty much nothing, like no compression. So let's do this. So that was one signal. Here's the slap without any compression. All right, so there we go. Those are just some slaps and pops. Now let's do this. Our compressor is on now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's turn the ratio up to, let's do about 2.5 or so, which let's say that's about 1030 on the dial, maybe 11.
Yep.
All right. And let's see. So turn the pedal a little this way so you can see where the light's coming on here. Still really nothing's happening. And I think that's because the threshold is set very high. So let's turn the threshold back to about 1130 where it's just starting to kick in.
Okay.
I think I can reach that kind of volume.
Yep.
Not doing a whole lot. You're not going to hear it being very squashy. So here's what we're going to do now. Let's turn the ratio up all the way. All the way. This is a crazy, crazy ratio that we're going to. So this is really going to be a brick wall limiter. Hear how that hear how it really made it quieter?
Yep.
Because basically over that level, it's not letting any more sound out at that point, pretty much.
Right.
So now what you could do is you could turn the threshold up at this point.
Right. To get,
okay.
Yep.
And now it's going to be doing it less. So let's say, I don't know, like 11:30 maybe, or noon.
Yep.
Little louder than it was, but still. It's still limiting though.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's get that threshold down again at about 11:30.
Yep.
So we're probably, I don't even know what the values are. On this particular unit, you can't read numbers off of it.
Right.
And that's fine. Let's turn the ratio down to, I don't know, I find that like about 11:30 for the ratio is good too.
Yep.
Usually. Or maybe 11:30, something like that. All right. Now we're doing just the slightest amount of compression at this point. What I would do, so typically what I would do at this point is I would pick, a ratio. I'd probably go a little bit higher in the ratio.
Yep.
And then I turn the threshold down a little more. That's a pretty neat sound.
Right.
Like it sounds very even.
Yep. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's play with it and make it really weird.
Yep.
Turn the attack. We're going to take the attack, which is right now a fairly slow attack. That means slow attack, meaning it's long. It's a longer time. It's turned up to
before it kicks in
pretty far. Yeah.
Right.
Let's turn the attack way down. In other words, make it really, really, really fast.
Yep.
Okay. So this is super fast. Is that as fast as it's going to go?
Yeah.
Like all the way.
Yep.
All right. Let's see what happens.
Right.
You're not getting here. It's like moi, moi. You hear that?
Yeah.
Sounds terrible. That's awful.
So weird.
I mean, it almost doesn't even sound like I'm plucking. It sounds like I'm turning a note on like a keyboard bass almost, which is not bad.
I mean, you would have to
but
yeah. I mean, and if you were playing like really slow and gentle.
Yeah. There's just no, it has no, there's no transient on it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So turn that attack back up to about 2 or 230.
Yep.
Now we're getting a little bit more of that juice out of it. So right now we've got a release that's very slow.
Right.
So like turn that a little bit this way so I can see where the light's at. So, oh, apparently I need to adjust the action on this thing, but. So that's a fairly natural release sound.
Right.
Turn the release way up, way up. Hear all that sustain?
Yep.
Like you get a lot of sustain by turning the
going.
release way up.
So is that what controls it? Because there's like so there's this thing that I'll like manipulate with mine. I'll just play with the knobs and try to figure out. But sometimes like especially if I want a like an effect.
Yeah.
Like let's say an octaver.
Yeah.
Right? And I want the octave to like sound super synthy, and I just want one note to run into another.
Right.
Like, and I play gentle.
Yeah.
Like I turn the gain up, but I play gentle, and I just want it to go like, wee.
Yes. You can. What you could do is use a brick wall limiter. And you might even use a slightly faster attack than you normally would, and then a really long release, and it's going to sound like ba 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 rather than having the ba ba. It'll be more like ba ba ba.
Right.
Like over evens it out for most things, but if you're trying to get a certain sound, you can do that with
and to sustain it from one to the next.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Like it's that light was still on while I was playing those notes.
Right.
Like it's still hanging on there.
Yeah.
So take the release. So here's one thing that you can do that's interesting. So let's do this. Let's get back to let's go to we have a fairly slow attack, which is good. Let's take the release time back down to a pretty fast release. Let's say like 11 o'clock. And let's see, our ratio is probably pretty good. It looks like I'd say take the threshold up a little bit from where it is right now. It's fairly low, just a little bit. I'd say like, half an hour or so on the dial. Now turn the compressor off and let's hear the difference between the sounds. Okay, you're going to hear, this is compressor off. I'm going to let the note ring and then we're going to turn it on. Oh, actually, let me do it without the buzz. Oh, hang on. Like I'm going to hit the note. This is our unscripted thing. I'm going to hit the note. After I hit the note, let it ring for about a second and then turn the compressor back on.
Okay.
Here we go. Maybe a little faster than that. Let's try one more time. Off. We're going to start with the compressor off. I'm going to play the note and then you turn it on. So here it got louder.
Oh.
Right. So it got louder because we have our volume set at a certain way relative to what the compressor is doing. So what we might do is at this point, we might turn the volume down, I would say to maybe 12 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And now let's compare them again. One more time. Off, on. That's a pretty good match.
Pretty close.
So now we are using our makeup gain to make sure that when we click our pedal in, we're going to get a pretty we're going to get a pretty even tone compared to what we had before. So we're not going to like blow up the drummer or the guy behind the PA or whatever. Like we're changing that volume to match what we've done with the compression.
Right. So we're not impacting the output. We're just impacting like the tone.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do here is let's hear the compressor off. I'm going to do a few like slap and pops, and then you're going to turn the compressor off after I do like a couple beats worth. Turn it on. We're going to hear the difference in sound.
Yeah.
Ready? Off. On. Like you can hear the notes are like ba ba. They're kind of, rather than being kind of like falling off quickly, they have a little more sustain on them now.
Yeah.
But it's holding but I still get the percussiveness of the slap and pop come through.
Yeah.
And let's try like with some finger style. Off, on, like very even. Like it seems more even.
Yeah.
Now these differences may be subtle. If you're trying to listen to this in a noisy car, you may not be getting the full impact of it. I would really invite you to, try listening to this recording on some hi-fi headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, the MP3 is going to cut out a little bit of fidelity, because of the way they are, but it shouldn't really affect overall what you're hearing at the low end of the spectrum. And when you look at the waveforms, the funny thing is I can look at the waveforms on here, on our digital audio workstation where we're recording, and I can easily see the difference of what's going on here. Like it really is clear how things are changing. Let's do something that's like going to be a little more, we're going to do something a little more brutally here. Okay. So this will be like, say our goal here is we are going to slap the heck out of the bass, right? And what we want to do is I want to let the transient through, right? But I want to really chomp down on the sound, but then I want to get the volume back up where it was. So let's do this. Let's take the threshold down just a bit from where it is, like about half an hour or an hour. Let's do, and when I say for folks on the listening audience, I'm talking about like looking at it as a clock or whatever in terms of how much. Okay, that's too much. That's too much. Yeah, there we go, like 11 o'clock or maybe a little less. There we go. That's good. And let's do for the ratio. That's pretty good. Let's do that. That's fine. Let's take the attack down a little bit, so maybe to about 130 or 2. And let's take the release. Let's see. What do I like about the release? Let's take the release down a bit to about 9 o'clock. Okay. Now we're off. The compressor's off right now, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's hear what happens. Okay. It's off right now. I'm going to play. And while I play, you turn it on. So it's off right now. I really evened it up. I think it got a little quieter though. So let's take the volume up just a smidge, like maybe half an hour. Off and on.
Oh yeah.
Kind of evens it out.
Yeah.
I'm playing very terribly, but this is just I'm actually kind of over accentuating these stupid lines just to like show what the compressor is doing.
Stretch. Yes.
Now without the compressor, like that, those pops are a little annoying at that level. Right. But then with the compressor on, and I promise you I was not holding back that time. Like it just reins them in a little bit.
Yeah.
So these are the ways,
because I think the thing is like, especially when you get into like the slapping piece, it's percussive.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's just less control.
Yeah. Yeah. By its nature, it's a little more imprecise. I mean, which isn't to say like you can be more precise. I mean, you can go find like, there's the Marcus Millers out there who are like, that guy, probably you took a compressor away from him, he would still sound like Marcus Miller. It'd be very controlled because he's been doing it for, forever. But for those of us who are mere mortals.
On the practical side.
Yeah. I mean, we can use that little bit of help to just kind of even things out to where they're, they're the way we like them.
And I think, especially on like the slapping side, like I think that's why so many of us like don't get into those waters in a live situation.
Yeah.
right? Because we know, like, yeah, we could do it at home. It sounds great because it's like a controlled environment. But like once you get out on a live stage,
Yes.
and you're like rigged up and you got your amp, sounds great. When
Yeah.
you're like practicing whatever, like you do a couple of notes to make
Yeah.
sure the sound sounds right, and then as soon as you start slapping, it's
Yeah.
huge out there.
Big difference. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
having that compressor really will, like, it gives you that control.
Yeah.
And it really is all about, like, when you find the sound that you want, I think, you know, the key for me is knowing what, especially like that gain, the input versus the output.
Right.
Knowing that part of the reason for doing this is not just to turn the compressor on and then suddenly you get quieter. If that's happening, you're not doing it right.
Right.
Right. Or if you turn the compressor on, you suddenly get
Yeah.
way louder. Again, probably not doing it right. What you want to do is, you know, set the input. If the compressor has an input volume on
Yep.
it, some of them do, some of them don't. Set that to where you know you're not fuzzing or distorting in the compressor.
Right.
You can hear that with your ears. As long as there's no fuzz on the top, you're good.
Yeah.
And then the output, like, set things so, you know, again, you're getting the kind of the ratio that you want. The compressor's coming on when you want it and not when you don't. Like when you play delicately, you probably don't want it to be compressing too much because you're trying to play lightly then, and you want that to come through.
Yes.
When you play heavier, that's when you probably want to see it start kicking in. And you may not want it to kick in unless you're really, really digging in. That's fine
Right.
too. Right. So you set it to taste.
Yeah.
Right. Set all those things to taste and then adjust that final output so
Right.
that when you are turning the compressor on and off, your volume is staying consistent
Yep.
on the stage.
Yeah. That's well said, actually, because I think about, like, as you were saying that, I'm thinking about the process that I go about. Mostly it's not at home. Like I don't be, and as I think you've mentioned this in a past episode, but we really like, when I'm practicing, there's no compressor, right? Because I'm just like getting to know my instrument. But I practice using my compressor
Yeah.
when I'm practicing for a gig. I
Yeah.
always use my compressor because
So you know what's going to happen.
I know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and I'm getting used to like making sure my settings are right. Because however I take it out of my gig bag, it's always weird,
Yeah.
right?
Knobs
and it's
are going to
weird.
change.
Knobs are going to change.
Yeah.
Environments are going to change. Different band settings are going to change.
Yeah.
And really, what I'm looking for
And
is
different
like
basses are going to change it
different
too.
Yes, yeah.
So.
And maybe you have like an output where like you've got, you know, a PA system where you've got a huge like rig
Yeah.
and all of that, right? They're all variables. But exactly what you're saying, which is like make sure if you're get comfortable enough with it where you know that what to do when you're on stage before the gig starts, that you can tweak it so
Right.
that you're getting that like the compression sound that you're looking for at different volumes and where it's really going to start to like crunch down. And that like my last move is always like compressor on, compressor off
Yeah.
at different volumes. Like how is it changing my output or is
Yeah.
it staying the same?
Right.
And that's the last move.
Right. Exactly. And that, you know, that last move is basically, that is where, you know, getting that last link in the chain, that last volume move, that's the thing that does the real magic. Cause it's not all about lowering the loud parts and making them not so loud.
Right.
That part, what that means is that you can now take the parts that are coming in a little too quiet and you can raise everything up a little bit,
Right.
and know that you're not going to like blow the roof off by getting too loud.
Right.
Now the parts that are coming out too quietly are going to come in more evenly.
Yes.
So that really is the magic of the
Yeah.
compressor. And I'd say the other thing is like a little goes a long way. If you really hear the compressor doing a lot of work, chances are it's too much.
Yeah.
Like you don't want, and we've done some examples here that in some situations I would say were too much. Like this
Yeah.
last thing that we did, arguable, right?
Yeah.
And you know how that works on different compressors. You're going to want to look at how they tell you whether they're compressing. This one has a single light that kind of comes on at a variable brightness depending on how much it's compressing. So if it gets
Yeah.
really bright, it's compressing a lot, and it fades out as it stops compressing. Some of them are going to give you what they call a gain reduction or a GR level. And that'll
Right.
tell you, oh, when you popped, I'm taking off like 3, 5,
Yeah.
7 dB. If you see that coming on all the time while you're playing, even when you're playing lightly or delicately, that's probably too much compression, unless that is literally the effect you're going for.
Right, because it can be used as an effect.
Yeah, absolutely. You can that wild limiting that we did early on, that might be something that you may want in some situations. So don't be afraid to experiment. You're not going to break anything, right?
No.
Give it a try and listen to the different ways that you can use your compressor and go to town.
Yeah, be free.
Yeah, it is all about being free.
Be free, man.
Well, great. Well, that's a great place to wrap up for tonight. So thank you very much for listening. Dave and I have enjoyed kind of going through an unscripted episode and just trying some fun stuff with a bass and a compressor here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's a little bit different, a little off our beaten path. Let us know. Give us some feedback. Don't be afraid to reach out and say hi. It doesn't matter if you know us or not. We'd love to hear from you. You can do that at the website. Go to practicalbass.com and use the feedback form, or you can send us an email at podcast@practicalbass.com. That comes directly to Dave and me. We read everything we get religiously. And you can even leave us some suggestions for other topics you'd like to hear us cover. We love to do listener mail like that. We've done a few episodes recently that are like that. So we hope we will hear from you. Also, we would love it if you would subscribe and share. Subscribe and share. It's so important for podcasts like this. If we want to stay doing the things that we're doing, that we know that there are people out there interested in it. And the best way to show us that interest is to be subscribed to the podcast. It's very easy if you're using podcasts on your iPhone or iTunes on your macOS device, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, or just about any podcatching app on any platform. You can find Practical Bass. Just do a search for Practical Bass, and when the link comes up, hit subscribe, and you'll get a fresh episode delivered to you every week for free. Nada. Zero cost. Zilch.
All value.
Nil. Zippo. So until the next time, I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
This has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, that's like cooking in general for us in the summer, because we have that like old freaking house, and the kitchen that they made, I guess, in the 1920s was like tiny. Like it's an 8x8 kitchen with doors, like in case if you want to trap yourself and kill yourself. I don't know why they put doors in there. They're like, this is for the woman that's cooking in the kitchen. We're going to trap her in there.
Just make sure she stays there until that cobbler's done.
Yeah, because we don't want to know how hot it is from the dining room right next door. Why are there doors on like every aspect of my kitchen? It's so small. It's like, oh, here's a closet. Cook in that.
Yeah.